Hey, I'm Angelo Pinto, and welcome to Let It Rip. We're coming to you from the CUNY TV studios in the shadow of the Empire State Building in New York City. Nationally, ICE has a record, and it's written in blood. This year, federal immigration enforcement has killed civilians. Renee Nicole Good, a U.S. citizen, shot and killed by ICE agents in Minneapolis. Alex Petrie, a U.S. citizen and ICU nurse, shot and killed by federal immigration agents in Minneapolis. Keith Porter Jr., a father, shot and killed by an off-duty ICE agent in California. Now let's bring it home to New York City. When ICE kills nationally, when TPS ends federally, what role does New York play locally? And for Haitian New Yorkers right now, that is not a debate. This is not rhetoric. This is survival. New York has to decide, are you a firewall or are you a transfer point? Like always, Let It Rip is bringing the hard, unfiltered conversations with those closest to the issues. Here to discuss are Conrad Blackburn, Christian Celeste Tate, I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip. So Christian, we'll start with you. You've been arrested twice, protesting ICE. What's your sense of what's going on in New York City, kind of nationally, what's happening in Minneapolis? Where do you see things going? What are your thoughts generally around this ICE piece?
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about how every action has its equal and opposite reaction, right? And I think that as the Trump administration has escalated things, we are seeing the equal and opposite reaction as communities are organizing themselves. I think Minneapolis has given us a heartbreaking, but also an awe-inspiring example of what it can look like to show up for each other and how even ICE is responsive to that, right? Organizing works. And so I think we see the same thing happening here in New York. I organize in Bushwick and East New York, and folks are communicating with each other. When there's an ICE sighting anywhere in our community, there are mechanisms to get the word out. And there are trainings that go on to teach people how to show up when you get that call in a way that is effective and also, I'll say risk aware, if not safe, because there's no safety involved. But I'm super inspired by that reaction that we're seeing, because at the end of the day, we're going to be the ones to keep us safe.
And it's likely that ICE will continue to escalate as they have. Conrad, do you think things will look different in New York City under the current administration as opposed to what you see in Minneapolis and Chicago and Los Angeles? Do you think New York will feel, look, and be different, or do you think it'll be more of what we see around the country where the people are forced to respond in ways elected officials won't?
In many ways, I think New York's response will look similar to Minnesota's because there was an appetite for normal people to fight in Minnesota. And that appetite is here in New York as well. And then in other ways, it's different because our mayor is someone who is the son of immigrants, so he understands that struggle personally, and he's going to do all he can within his power to fight back against ICE too. And so many of our elected leaders are behind that movement as well. And so we might see a lot more of a response from our newer elected officials.
Do you think the ICE and possibly not NYPD entanglement, how do you think that will look on the ground? And do you feel like that proximity that the administration will now have with police will cause disenfranchisement in other communities as opposed to, pushing back against ICE and police, which was some of the things that he was running on?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think we're seeing that on the ground. Like you said, I've been arrested twice now protesting ICE. And it's interesting the ways in which those arrests and
arrested by NYPD.
By NYPD, yeah. And it's interesting the ways in which these protests reflect and also differ from the BLM protests a couple years ago. The level of aggression and hostility that we see from NYPD in these protests, from my experience personally, is a lot less. And I think that's because of exactly what you're referencing. And I think we can hold that as a truth, but we also need to acknowledge that the conversations we're having about ICE are not just about ICE. These are conversations about over-policing writ large, and those conversations include NYPD.
I mean, that's exactly right. The same tools and systems that are used to oppress Black people in, poor neighborhoods are the same tools that they're going to use to oppress brown people from poor neighborhoods and brown people who get entangled in the criminal punishment system. It's oftentimes NYPD who will pick an immigrant up for, a quote unquote alleged crime and then hold an immigrant in detention at Rikers. And then, That person will go through the system. They'll get farmed to immigration court, and then ICE will take them away, and then they'll go to immigration court. And so it's the same systems that sweep up young black people in poor neighborhoods that sweep up immigrants. And that's why it's so important for New York to disentangle themselves from the NYPD. That's why it's important for New York for All to get passed, because New York for All will ensure that the state is no longer cooperating with local law enforcement, will not be cooperating with DMV to pass information to federal agents and to ICE.
Do you think New York for All will pass? What do you think the hurdles are there?
You know, the hurdles are the same hurdles to opponents of this everywhere, right? There's a backlash from the right. There's a backlash from people who want the country to look a certain way, who don't want the types of positive change that immigrants bring to the country. And so, you know, the powers that be, they try to stop this progress that we are trying to make to build a better New York for everybody, including people who weren't born here. I think there is an appetite. I think people are going to fight. I think New York for All is going to pass in the wake of everything that we're seeing in Minnesota, right? In the wake of everything we're seeing around the country, that there's an appetite to protect our immigrant brothers and sisters, because at the end of the day, it's not just immigrants being swept up by everything going on. We've seen citizens being stopped and harassed and tortured. We've seen citizens being deported. And then the president says, oh, it's too late. They're already gone. Can't bring them back.
Certainly.
Right?
And we've seen ICE, I know in Newark, ICE arrested the mayor, and you've seen ICE escalate with now the murder of folks that's been caught on camera. Do you think it's important for local law enforcement to escalate in the same way? There's folks who said, will local law enforcement agencies arrest ICE officers who break the law? Do you think this will happen in New York City? Do you think it should happen? Or do you think the local police department will continue to arrest peaceful protesters as opposed to target individuals who may be breaking the law in uniform?
Yeah, I mean, I think I expect to see the things that we've seen, right? I think that NYPD will continue to arrest peaceful protesters. I also think we shouldn't be sitting here hoping that they are going to intervene to save us, because NYPD can't save us, right? We are going to be the ones to save ourselves through organizing. And like Chairman Fred said, we're not going to fight fire with fire. We're not going to fight cops with cops. We're not going to fight capitalism with capitalism, right? We need to look for new solutions.
And do you think that stifles what Zohran is saying he's able to do and his usefulness around using the NYPD to push back against ICE? To your point, using law enforcement to confront law enforcement and getting more of the same from the NYPD. Do you think that means he will be less effective in his ability to do anything, you know, as it pertains to confronting ICE agents?
Yeah, look, I think the mayor is looking at every tool that's available to him to intervene to keep New Yorkers safe, right? But I think the tool that is most valuable to him and to us is the movement building work that brought him to the place that he's in right now. So again, like, I think there are important questions to ask and conversations to have about the role NYPD will play, but again, we're going to be the ones to save us. It's not going to be NYPD.
Now, what about other elected officials, right? Because, of course, the mayor is one thing, but what about, you know, New York State Assembly, senators, city council members? Do you think they have a role to play? Do you think they've escalated and played enough role in confronting ICE and speaking about the expansion and making New York a true sanctuary? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, what I can speak to is, you know, locally in Harlem, where I live, our leaders have not been using the bully pulpit to push back against a lot of what we're seeing in our community. You know, we've seen so many raids up near 112th, 116th Street, where a lot of our African migrant brothers and sisters are being picked up by ICE, and we don't see our leaders come to the streets.
What would you like to see them do? What do you think they should be doing?
I think they should be out on the streets organizing with the people. I think they should be finding the organic leaders in the community, organizing those organic leaders, making sure that they have an ear to the streets, and making sure that they know exactly when ICE is coming to our communities to terrorize our communities, and then be out there telling ICE to get out of our communities, right? And if it takes, we've seen Jabari Brisport, who is a state senator, we've seen him being arrested at immigration court, protecting, you know, people.
You'd like to see that kind of activism and action from elected officials?
Yes.
Do you think it's going to happen?
I mean, from what I've seen so far, no, right? I have not seen a willingness to put their body, their life, their profits on the line to protect the people that they're supposed to protect. So no, I don't.
And I guess to the same question, but to a different point, why do you think folks are continuing to elect these individuals who may not be standing on the front line on these issues, particularly around ICE, which is a national issue everyone's talking about it? Students are walking out, folks are getting arrested daily. Why do you think folks are continuing to elect folks who are not paying as close attention, not being as activists in response to the current dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, so first, I think to the first question, like in Bushwick and East New York, it's a mixed bag, right? The first time I was arrested, it was alongside about a dozen elected officials that included our state senator, it included our city council member, that's Julia Salazar in the Senate, and Sandy Nurse in the council. So that work is being done, right? And that
some are
fuels
stepping
the
up to the plate.
Some are stepping up, right? There are plenty who are not, right? And to your point, I think that there are a lot of reasons why. I think honestly, a lot of it is name recognition, a lot of it is nepotism. And the sad reality is that it's not just folks on the right that we are fighting against in this case. It's corporate Democrats. And the same special interests that prop those Democrats up and have them out here peddling goods is the same thing that continues to feed their power over and over again.
Great conversation, and as always, we'll stay on top of this issue. I'd like to thank my guests for an awesome conversation. Let's take a short break, and I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip. CUNY is more than a university system. It's a gateway to power, opportunity, and community mobility. CUNY has always been at the forefront of change and resistance. A lot of Black and brown students and faculty have led student protests against the Trump administration and its gangster policies against communities of color. The vision for CUNY should be clear: a system that is truly inclusive, where Black and brown students see themselves in classrooms, in faculty roles, and in boardrooms, where every student, regardless of zip code or background, has the tools to succeed and lead. Here to discuss is newly appointed Chair of Higher Education and City Council member Rita Joseph. Councilwoman, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Before we dive into CUNY, I wanted to talk a little about temporary protected status of Haitian immigrants coming to an end. What are your thoughts about that? How do you think City Council and others should be responding in this moment?
As one of the 4 Haitian Americans in the New York City Council, use our platform to inform, advocate for temporary status. So we are informing our communities, stay vigilant in partnership with the mayor's office, put out support for legal attorneys to make sure that people know their rights. They can still continue to work while this plays out in the courts. So we are excited about the news. 25%, and folks probably don't even realize that 25% of New York City workforce is TPS holders.
Wow.
Almost 350,000 New Yorkers are TPS holders, and they're doctors, lawyers. They are coming from all walks of life, and we want to make sure that, and it also impacts the economy. They work and live and pay taxes here, and they're part of our communities. There are students, there are moms, there are dads, business owners, caregivers, essential workers. They are the front line. And so we want to make sure we protect that. We want a pathway to permanent residence. So we're also calling on Congress and the Senate to pass a comprehensive immigration reform.
And folks often think about the immigration issue as a brown issue or an issue not affecting Black folks. But to your point, there's a huge Haitian population, and of course even some African immigrant folks as well, who are impacted by this. Do you think this will allow the conversation to look and feel different as temporary protected status is at risk in this moment?
Absolutely, because it impacts everyone. Like you said, even when the Ukrainians were at war, they got TPS as well. Instability, and the purpose of TPS is anytime your home is not safe. So Haitians got TPS post-2010, after the most devastating earthquake killed almost 300,000 people. President Obama was like, we need to provide safe spaces for these folks. But things haven't gotten better for them to return back home. 80% of Port-au-Prince is ruled by gangs right now. Gangs and kidnapping. And so there is not a safe space to send anyone back. Even the State Department said Haiti is not safe. So how can we return folks to a place that's not safe?
And do you think the elected officials in this moment are stepping up to push back against ICE and really push the NYPD potentially to confront ICE? How do you think that's playing out? Would you like to see more from elected officials, or do you feel like they're doing enough in this moment?
We have been at the front line with ICE. Whenever there's we hear ICE in the area, we mobilize and we go. And we show up for community, and that's important. In this moment, more than ever, bringing families to court Some of our colleagues accompany families that are going in to see judges. So we have been at the forefront. I think more than ever, I've seen community members, electeds are stepping up to really push back on this ICE.
So let's talk about this new position.
Yeah,
Newly
let's talk
appointed
about it.
chair, higher education. What's your vision for yourself in the role, and what would you like to see happen in higher ed?
Ooh, a lot could happen. For me, I would love to see an expansion of College Now. For those who don't know what College Now is for students that are enrolled in high school. They can do a dual enrollment where they earn a high school diploma and earn an associate degree. But you know what's the great thing about that? Debt-free. You can start off, you graduate high school with an associate and a high school diploma. P-Tech schools are also where I would love to see an expansion as well, which is part of the CUNY system, is where students are put in a career pathway. For example, if you're a nursing track, that school, that P-Tech school will put you on a nursing path. You're already working with a hospital, you're already earning money even before you graduate. So I would love to see that ASAP. I would love to see that SEEK. Reconnect, that was also an initiative of the last speaker, Adrian Adams. It also brought back almost 40,000 students back into the system.
Wow. Because there was a time CUNY was free.
Yes, we would love to see it free again.
Right.
Free CUNY.
But the importance of programming that makes CUNY more affordable and free for students can, to your other point, increase enrollment.
Exactly.
Particularly amongst communities who may not be able to even afford what appears to be what folks call an affordable education.
That's right. And we would love to see that. We would love to see a free CUNY where folks can just earn a degree, and that removes a barrier that I'm not going into debt just to move up. So CUNY provides that for being affordable, and ASAP is one of them. SEEK, which provides support for students. I would love to see mental health. That's been across the spectrum since post-pandemic, whether it's K all the way to college. I know students have been wanting mental health, and that's for everyone. Childcare is important. In order for me to go to school, I will need childcare. So
Certainly.
Childcare.
Is there a particular role you'd like to see CUNY play around Black and brown students and even Black faculty
We
who
would
may
love
have
to
had
see
challenges?
more. We would love to see more diverse faculty on site. They say students learn better when they also see folks that reflect them. So we would love to see more of that. There's so many other ways, like I said, ASAP, SEEK, Discovery, Reconnect, mental health. This is so important, and I would love to see, one of the things that we also saw when I was looking at the data for CUNY, a lot of the students are also homeless students. How do we get them stabilized in homes to make sure they come into school? So that was another, I know that's one of the hearings I want to have. How do we create pathways for shortage areas, like we're short in educators? We're going to need a workforce for this universal childcare. So CUNY should be that pathway to provide that workforce. So my first hearing will be on the workforce through CUNY. How do we get that stabilized? And we know that's one way to uplift communities of color, immigrant communities. Sometimes this is the very first person who's going to college. So CUNY is that pathway. We want to make sure it's available and accessible, and making sure there's a connection between New York City Public Schools, which is the pipeline to CUNY, strengthen that pipeline, and when they come into our CUNY, they're able to.
Because have you seen a wedge or an obstacle in that pipeline? Do you think there's been some disruption with like K-12 to CUNY? Do you feel like there's some challenges there that can be alleviated, particularly in some communities that may not be able to afford education, may be underrepresented? What are your thoughts around that?
Support by the time they get there. Remember, one of the things we were seeing, students were not coming out of K-12 systems strong enough, prepared that when they got to CUNY, a lot of remedial classes to make sure they're catching up to do the caseload. So we want to make sure that we're strengthening them at the New York City Public Schools, and when they come in, they're strong. So I want to work that disconnect in education that's always there. I want it to be a connection.
And do you think there's a role CUNY plays in bridging that disconnect and potentially making the K-12 students stronger? Do you think there's a role for CUNY in that?
They have a program called ASAP where they tutor the students. So I think that would be great. If they continue to that, expand it, make it even stronger, so when students come in, they also have student success centers that help students get into college, but I don't think they talk to each other, which is something we see among a lot of city agencies. Everybody's just operating in their little circle. And I'm like, no. Everybody got to play in the sandbox in order for us to accomplish the goal.
And what would success look like for you? After your time maybe up in this position, I know it's just starting, what would success look like for you to say, I want to do X, Y, and Z? Do you have a checklist of things you'd like to achieve while you're here?
Absolutely. Making sure the programs that are also are funded. I don't like unfunded mandates. We always like to, ooh, beautiful program, but there's no money. We want to make sure they're funded, sustainable, that 5, 10 years from now when I'm gone, those programs are still in place, they're expanding, and they're strong.
And what's the obstacles to these programs being fully funded in the current moment? What's up with that?
Sometimes it's budget, and they're the first thing they want to
There's
cut
a deficit,
budget.
supposedly.
Yeah, there's a $12 billion deficit.
heard.
So we don't know where that chopping is going to come from. So
And
we
it
gotta
often comes to education.
always come from education. Even that's one of the things I know students complain about. Once there's a budget cut, it's like the arts go, the music goes. But those are the things sometimes that sustain students. That music class. I still remember my music teacher. I still remember my theater teacher because those things were important.
So before we wrap, you mentioned the unhoused students. How do we respond to that in the moment? As we know, New York City is kind of always in an unhoused crisis, but now you're seeing, or at least learning more about the students, K through 12, and also college students are unhoused. How do we respond to that? What would you like to see happen in that regard?
I know there's a plan to give out vouchers, Airbnb vouchers
Wow.
to the students. That's one plan. So in the K-12 world, as you know, 10% of our students live in temporary housing, which is about 150,000 of our students.
Tremendous amount of students.
That's a lot of students. So we need to work to bring that down. And that tells you, in the last 10 years when I taught, that number was 60,000. For it to
Almost
doubled in almost 20 years. So we got to look at what's the root cause of that, and how do we go in and solve that. We know affordability is one of them, being priced out in neighborhoods and displacement. So that's the root cause of the problem that we need to look at.
Powerful conversation. I would like to thank Councilmember Rita Joseph for her insight. Stay tuned as we take a break to discuss further. I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip. CMS and community workers need to be deployed where they are needed most, and policymakers need to be held accountable. Because when New Yorkers freeze to death in the streets, we all fail. Here to discuss is Gary Jenkins, former New York City Commissioner of Social Services, current interim CEO at Urban Pathways, and author of the new book, Never Give Up. Gary, what are your thoughts about the current administration's handling of this winter? It's certainly been one of the coldest we've had in quite some time.
Yes, thank you for having me on the show. Yes, it's very cold outside. The administration, the Mamdani administration, been in office for a little over 30 days, right? So you want to give them some grace. However, we do have a crisis with homelessness. We have folks that's on the street. However, the government, the agencies, and I'm going to speak about my former agency, Department of Social Services, DHS, Homeless Services, they have outreach teams. They're out there engaging individuals, really building trust, trying to bring them back in, get them off the street, into a safe haven, into a drop-in center, into one of the shelters where they can receive the care and compassion that they deserve.
Do you think they currently have the resources necessary to prevent more deaths? The winter is not over. It's still cold. Do you think they have what they need to meet the needs of the unhoused population? Do you think more needs to happen? Do you think there needs to be some connections that are not happened so far? What are your thoughts on how we move forward throughout the rest of this winter?
There's going to always be the need. There's going to always be a need. You need more outreach workers on the streets, engaging those individuals, in the subway system, engaging those individuals. So is there enough? I would say no, there's not. But the Mamdani administration is really looking at how do they drill down, what's needed, how do they impact those individuals who are unhoused. And when I say unhoused, living on the street. It's very cold outside. We're in a cold blue. Cold blue means, the temperatures are really, really low. So you need folks out there engaging those individuals, building that trust to bring them inside.
What do you see as some of the solutions to address this crisis of the unhoused? And there's a tremendous amount of individuals. It's doubled in, the past 20 or so years. How do you get a handle on that?
You need mental health professionals. Right, a lot of the unhoused individuals are going through crises, and they've been going through it for a number of years. It didn't just happen overnight. And you said in your opening remarks, homelessness is not a choice. You become homeless for a reason. You become unhoused for a reason. And when you're unhoused for such a long period of time, along comes with that is mental health challenges.
And this affordability piece, to your point, that this doesn't just happen by itself. How do we impact or confront the affordability issue in New York City? Because prices are going up, which likely means more unhoused folks. How do we respond to the affordability piece to hopefully begin to address this unhoused issue as well?
I mean, it's employment, right? It's training. You have to really and work with individuals to get them the training they need so they can get the jobs that's going to pay to be able to afford a house, a home, an apartment in New York City. New York City is an expensive city to live in. And if you don't have the resources, or if you lose the resources, you've been employed, and because for whatever reason you lost that job, now you're back in the market. You need to, the city needs to instill and really pour into those individuals to get them the skill set that they need so they can move up.
Do you think the rent stabilization piece matters? Because there are folks who are working and still can't afford a home or afford an apartment in New York City. How important are rent stabilization and even other policies to protect folks who are the working poor attempting to survive in a city like New York?
It's extremely important. You need rent stabilization in order to continue to thrive and survive in New York City. You need to know that your rent is not going to exceed what your earnings are. So for that population, they need to understand and recognize and respect that I have a job, I'm doing my best, but if you raise the rent, basically you're forcing me out of the city.
Certainly. And Gary, you have a new book, which speaks a little bit about your personal experience. Why did you write it? Tell us a little bit about your story.
So the book is called Never Give Up. And I wrote the book, and I was terrified when I first started writing the book because it really was telling my story, my personal journey. I'm the youngest of 8 kids, born and raised in Brooklyn, single parent household, grew up on government, on welfare back in the day, what it was called. And my experiences, I really wanted others to understand that your current circumstances does not define where you can go, how far you can go, and what you aspire to be.
And you experienced some of the issues you work on now. Is this correct?
Absolutely. I mean, my life's calling is public service. I love giving back to others because others gave back to my family when we were going through some trials and tribulations.
How important do you see the individuals who are directly impacted? We often say those closest to the problem are closest to the solutions. Those who've been directly impacted by issues of being unhoused, how important is it for them to be in leadership roles and figure out strategies to really create change around those areas?
I think it's extremely important to have a person with lived experience because their emotion and their drive is really going to be impactful because they went through what the folks that they're servicing are going through today.
Great conversation on a very pressing topic. I would like to thank Gary Jenkins and shout out to his new book, Never Give Up, a timely read. As always, we are here for you and for the people. Stay strong and stay true. I'm Angelo Pinto, and this is Let It Rip.